It took over 1 million signatures, and just for one day, thousands of women across South Africa stopped work and lay silently on the ground for 15 minutes. Why? Each minute representing a woman. The average is 15 women and girls killed per day. Now, November 21st led to the government declaring gender-based violence a national emergency. Is that just a strong headline or the start of real change? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and welcome to The Stream.
Why is everyone's profile picture purple?
It is time for us to shut this country down.
Everyday therapist, mother made myth and a virgin nurse.
This isn't just a purple profile picture, it's a protest.
Did you know that gender-based violence and femicide isn't actually a national disaster?
South Africa has one of the highest femicide rates in the entire world.
6 times higher than the global average.
This isn't only a problem in South Africa, it's global.
South Africa has some of the worst cases of gender-based violence against women and children.
More than 30 women were killed in the month of August alone.
Now, the UN says South Africa's femicide rates are 5 times higher than the global average. So today we're looking at what the latest shutdown actually represents and how has a simple color, purple, become a unifying symbol online that has spread across continents. Well, to discuss this, we are joined by Kasambala. She joins us first. She's the spokesperson at Women for Change in South Africa, the group who organized the women's shutdown. Cameron, great to have you on the show. First of all, let's start by how did you manage to mobilize so many people? You got over 1 million signatures, you got thousands to the streets across the country. How did that work?
I truly don't think we have words to even begin to explain how it worked. I think, we're a team of 5 people, and I don't think we could have fathomed that it would get this much reach, We knew that we had a strong online presence within South Africa and that we could get our community to be involved. And, we had 170,000 signatures already. So we knew just to keep pushing and that we would get a reaction. But for it to reach this level of reaction, particularly globally, was a complete shock to us. I think for us, it was just amazing to see how many people related to, found solidarity and safety in this movement. And I think that's what helped a lot is people believed in the movement. People believed in what we were doing. And that's why they jumped on to support it.
Just 5 of you making such massive change. How impressive. Well, let's take a look at what we're talking about because Cameron took us along with her throughout that day. Let's take a look.
It is now time for the national shutdown, and I am going to be getting dressed and ready to go to Constitution Hill so I can make sure that I'm in time for the 12 o'clock 50 minutes of silence, and I'm going to bring you along. Okay, let's head to Constitution Hill now.
This moment is important, and we're so grateful to have had the support and the turn-up that we had. We've actually been seeing shutdowns happening across the world in support of our G20 solidarity. So what it's telling us is it's not just here that we believe this needs to change. It is across the world that this needs to change. And I hope global leaders realize the power of the citizens and our voices. And I hope that the people and the citizens of other countries recognize right now the power of their voices as well.
Today, we gathered for the women who never made it back home. For the sisters, the daughters, the mothers whose voices were stolen too soon.
It was very intense. I think lying down, trying to center myself, knowing why everyone is here. And the reason that everyone's here was really overwhelming because it's not just people who were lying down with me, but it's people who are victims.
The atmosphere was blissful. However, the energy was felt, and for thousands of people to come together for one influence, and that is to decrease and to stop gender-based violence.
I think what really helped me carry this on was that yesterday I witnessed the president announcing us as a national crisis, and I jumped for my life and I said, this is what I'm fighting for.
We heard it there, that massive win you had, the government of South Africa now declaring this a national disaster, gender-based violence and femicide. What is this, first of all, how important is that? And then practically, what does it actually mean?
I think it is so important because what it does is it helps us see that the government is acknowledging how much of a crisis gender-based violence and femicide actually is, because it is one, and we've been trying to get them to recognize that for a long time. So this is affirmation that they are finally seeing it as the crisis it is. And because of the way that it was done, said at the G20 Social Summit, it's not only allowing for local pressure to be pushing on them, it's also international pressure, because declaring something or, classifying something as a national disaster is something the world then sees and can hold us accountable to. Because if it is as much of a disaster as they're saying it is, then they have to react accordingly. So on the ground, what that means for us more practically is that we can expect the government to begin to implement more efficiently the existing frameworks and policies, because we have fantastic frameworks and policies. We don't need any kind of new legislation or new things being done. We need efficient implementation of already what exists. So we're looking at proper funding of the National Strategic Plan. We're looking at improvements on Jazeera care centers, developing a committee with multi-ministerial, civil society, private organizations. Like, that is what we're wanting to see, real action. And I think we will believe it once we see it beginning to come into fruition. But I think the biggest thing is that we need to see audits, reports, and transparency on exactly what's happening, because they made this promise in 2019 when they allocated 21 billion rand to the National Strategic Plan, and it was supposed to go from 2020 to 2030. And with the numbers that we've seen, a 33.8% increase in femicide in the past year, there's something severely lacking. So we don't need more pens to paper, we need action.
I want you to break that down for us, because, of course, gender-based violence isn't alone to South Africa, but South Africa does seem to have some of the highest rates. Why is that? How would you describe why we're seeing these huge numbers and why you're saying now it's increasing?
I think it's such a multi-layered issue, and that's, I think, the complexity of human beings is it's not just one key factor. I think within South Africa specifically, we had the apartheid system, which was rooted in violence and control. And so often masculinity and power were then aligned with this idea of violence and control. And so what then came is that this belief to be a man then meant being this violent, controlling, and aggressive being. And that kind of thinking, transpired across generations. And that's when we speak to intergenerational trauma, where that is something that was continued, learned with each generation. And I think there's other elements that come into. We look at patriarchy and how patriarchy places women, children, and the queer community as second-class citizens and objects that can be abused. And if I hit a table, I'm not going to be bothered because it's a table. But if you view a human being as equivalent to a table, you're going to be much more comfortable committing violence against them. And I think within South Africa as well, we have an unemployment issue, we have a substance use issue, and these worsen the rates of GBV within South Africa as well.
Okay, well, since we're discussing the root causes of gender-based violence, it's important to look at the behaviors that we normalize in society. Well, this clip questions the double standard.
One of the worst things that's embedded in the fabric of our society is that we teach women to survive men instead of teaching men not to harm women. We live in a society where the burden of safety is constantly put on women and not men. From the time women are young, from the time they are girls, they're given this long list of things to do. Don't wear this, don't go here, don't walk without a man, don't trust men, share your location, carry pepper spray, don't drink too much, don't do this or that. But men are never taught in the same way, they're never raised in the same way. You do not teach men to not pressure women, to not take advantage of vulnerability, to not show dominance through violence, to not treat women like objects. You constantly put all of the blame on women. This type of way of thinking is social conditioning, not nature. Men are not just more violent. Society allows men to be more violent. Or constantly trying to blame it on biology and say, this is just how boys are, boys will be boys. When no, you are socially conditioning them into this type of behavior. If boys are raised better, then we will get better results. You cannot continue to teach boys these things and expect something different.
Cameron, you were nodding profusely there as you were listening to him speak. What's your reaction? You agree?
I fully agree. I think it has been learned behavior. We have taught people that certain expectations are normal, that all the responsibilities on women. We've also taught boys that they can almost absolve themselves of responsibility because it's genetic. And I really liked how he said, it's not biology, it's social conditioning. And I think that is so important when we have these conversations. This isn't natural behavior. This isn't something that people naturally do. And I mean, if we take it back to historical, I mean, the whole purpose was to protect one another and to, procreate and to look out for one another. And so how is it possible then that killing and murdering and abusing the other party makes any sense, biologically? So I think he spoke such important information. And what I would add to that as well is we teach women and girls these things and we still die. And I think that's so important. Is it doesn't matter how much pepper spray, taser, how many locations you've released, how many people you've told where you're going, how much you've drunk or didn't drink. It all still results in people being killed. I mean, people have been asleep in their homes and have people break in and kill them. Like, you know, how do you then even begin to fathom the idea that you can have any control over your own safety?
It's so interesting, isn't it? We found a clip from your organization, and that was from a couple of years ago on TikTok, where you asked women to imagine a world without men just for 24 hours and what they would change. And very interesting, a lot of them talked about walking alone at night, going to the beach with friends, perhaps falling asleep. Do you remember this clip? Can you tell me a little bit more about what difference it would make if women felt safe around men?
I remember this clip, and I've had conversations within my own circle of people about this kind of thing. And I don't think people realize how on guard women and girls are in society. We're constantly in this fight or flight mode, constantly stressed out. Our bodies are constantly in this panicked space. And that does a lot of damage to your mental health, your physical health, your emotional well-being. And I think that's why when we think of a world without men and without this fear, because it's what we associate men with now, it's this fearful, violent, and dangerous thing, you feel so much more at peace. And things that other people might take for granted, like being able to walk, you know, down the street without having to look over your shoulder or have your fists ready to run and wear the right kind of shoes. Like, those things shouldn't be something we are asking for, but it's something that I even personally, I feel that. I feel so much empathy and understanding, because I feel that way when I go shopping. You know, I feel that way when I look around a room and I think, oh my gosh, there's no women in this room. Like, what is the nearest escape route? Can I take this man on if I had to fight for my life? You know, like, these are real thoughts that go on in my head. And I know people around me and the women around me also have these feelings. So I think it's so true that I don't think people can understand how terrifying it is to live this way, to constantly be on guard like this.
It is, because we're not having an abstract conversation, right? You're a woman, I'm a woman. We have all experienced these things. In fact, the World Health Organization says that 1 in 3 women will experience some form of gender-based violence in their lifetime. That is an extraordinary figure. And of course, we also have to say, we're not here to bash all men. There are incredible men in this world, and that's why they're also so important, aren't they, Cameron, in helping change, whether it's the education or you say the social structure. What would you like to see happen now in South Africa moving forward that does translate to these real changes?
I think you've highlighted such an important part about men and their role within gender-based violence, because I think it also is a very, I want to say, binary thought. You're either a perpetrator and a villain, or you're the good guy. And what people don't realize is there's a spectrum of people. You can be a repeat offender, a one-self offender, but then you have the people that are friends with and enable that and encourage it and laugh at that. Then you have people who are okay with it and they don't say anything, but they still remain friends. You have people that ignore it. And there's so much more that happens that still makes you a part of the problem. And then you have the small group that are actively protesting against it, pushing back on it. Like, those people are the men that we are like, please be like those men, be the people that push back against these things. And I feel like once we have, you know, this unified front where men recognize how they can be a part of this, whether it's self-work and recognizing their own trauma and bias and things that they need to work on, whether it's calling out men within their community, because men listen to men. And then for us, I think what we would love to see is, once the government sets the tone for the country, we can really start to look at the almost trickle-down effect on the grassroots level and take that approach and say, cool, the government's doing their thing. Now, from a grassroots level, how do we challenge social and cultural norms? How do we begin to have these conversations? How do we begin to heal a country of such violence? So I think it's a lot of doing now that work in changing the narratives, tackling this rape culture, this normalization of violence, like beginning that kind of work.
Cameron, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Such incredible, important work you and your colleagues do. So thank you very much for joining us on the stream.
Thank you so much for having us and having this conversation.
Well, let's look deeper now at how online support has played a huge role in driving this movement. Although the internet isn't always a safe space, the violence women face online often spills over into real-world harm. Now, joining us to discuss this is Chioma Agwuegbo, the Executive Director of Dekker. her. Chioma, thank you so much for coming on the show. We were just talking to Cameron about the practicalities of the real world, but you are seeing gender-based violence, harassment, also online. Describe to us what you see.
Thank you very much. And I think Cameron and the team at Women for Change do incredible work. Unfortunately, the statistics for online violence even trump physical violence. As in Nigeria, we have seen that 1 in 2 women will face online violence in their lifetime. And it ranges from everything: doxing, dog whistling, cyberbullying, cyber flashing. We've recently moved from non-consensual intimate image abuse to non-consensual synthetic image abuse, which is where generative AI tools are used to perpetrate violence against women. As a matter of fact, the recent pastime of perpetrators is using apps to undress women. And this has happened to celebrities, to regular people, you name it. Perpetrators are really wreaking havoc on women and girls in Nigeria and across West Africa and across Africa and globally.
I want to highlight 2 recent incidents actually circulating on social media in which women's visibility online has led to real, serious and significant backlash. Let's have a listen.
In Tanzania, an influencer was arrested after joining a viral dance challenge, one that used the president's voice. She's now facing charges like treason, and in Tanzania, treason can mean the death penalty. In Mali, a TikToker was taken by armed men and the next day brought back and executed in public, all for posting in support of her country's military. When does controlling speech stop being about keeping order and start becoming oppression?
These are not isolated cases, right? We've seen it happen, like you mentioned, globally. Where does this come from? When you have women who are outspoken online, and of course it is such a globalized world now, everybody has access to that. Where does this anger come from? Can you unpack that? I know it's a complicated question.
It's a big question, yes. So thank you for asking. I think it's a number of things. First off, you have the fact that there are no consequences. There are scant consequences for online gender-based violence. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria and across a lot of the countries of the world, we haven't taken gender-based violence as seriously as we should take it. Sometimes in our naming culture, we tend to downplay the violence that's done to women. And I just wanted to add one case to what you've mentioned from Tanzania and this lady who was executed. In Nigeria, a lady went on her Facebook and she reviewed a tomato paste that she bought. And the company that makes this tomato paste have now hounded this lady over and over again to the point where she lost her baby. She miscarried. And so I completely agree with you with the fact that, women and girls using the internet, trying to exist online in supposedly safe spaces, face an inordinate amount of abuse, an inordinate amount of violence. And sometimes this violence doesn't just come from individual perpetrators. It could come from the state. It could come from big business. It could come from, unfortunately, anybody who has a little bit of extra money. It could also come from the herd. And this is something we're starting to tackle at Dekker, which is, what is the thing that makes men look at a pylon happening for a vocal woman, especially vocal women, especially feminists, especially women's rights activists? What is the thing that makes them feel we want to take this woman a notch down? We want to take her a peg down.
Chioma, why is this not being done to men? Like, where does that come from? Why is it that women seem to trigger this kind of behavior?
If you go back to our norms and our societies, Nigeria is a conservative country. We have patriarchal norms. We have systems that say that women should be silent, women shouldn't speak too much, women can't be too vocal. As a matter of fact, right now, Nigeria is at the bottom of the rung when you think about women in political spaces, women holding political office. So we are starting from, what you might call dire straits, to then have internet spaces or online spaces that allow women to express themselves, to speak, be vocal. It challenges those patriarchal norms. And so the entire wave of violence that we see is a push back against those norms. I mean, globally, we're seeing a pushback against feminism, against body agency, against women speaking up, against women being opinionated. It seems to trigger some sort of backlash from men. And this is not all men, rightly said, but it is a significant number of men. And we have to be honest that the demographic that is perpetrating is men. the overwhelming demographic that is perpetrating this violence is men. We have to call it out for what it is, because in calling it out, we are then able to seek solutions to not only prevent women and girls from getting abused offline, it is also to prevent this violence. We've had to deal with a case where a secondary school student received images of her teacher's privates. And he said to her, what I have taught you in class, you probably haven't ever seen it live. I'm going to send it to you. First of all, sending them to anyone is criminal, more so sending it to a child. And so we have to continually push, not just to respond when these incidents have occurred, but also to prevent them, to educate our populace and say, this is criminal behavior. This is unwelcome behavior. We're currently engaging with influencers because we want to reach men at the different strata in society.
Is there enough accountability when it comes to these kinds of actions?
There isn't enough accountability. As a matter of fact, we have big tech platforms running the social media across the continent without trust and safety teams on the continent. And so you have people scrambling, whether it is via, chatbots or moderated trust and safety teams who try to answer the questions that are of things that are happening on the continent. So something happens in Nigeria, you have someone sitting in San Francisco trying to make sense of it. Oftentimes they lack the nuance, they lack the context. And so women who make reports often get responses like, this hasn't violated our community standards, but it has. Because if you take away the hijab of a woman, if you use generative AI tools to take away the hijab of a northern woman or of a Muslim woman, you are exposing her to risk. Someone else might see it and say, well, she's not naked, but you are exposing her to risk in the part of the country that she comes from and for the religion that she subscribes to. So this type of this tension often means that there's a lot of gaps. Women and girls fall through the cracks of what justice could actually look like. And this is the bridge that Dekker exists to be for women and girls.
Such an important thing these days, isn't it? Trying to protect girls and women online. How difficult is it? Like, it is such a challenge, right? How do you protect women and girls from online harassment, from these images? It's impossible.
The first thing is education. First of all, we want women to know what abuse looks like. A lot of times, because there's such a disregard for what we face, women just believe, you know what, it's happening, I'm going to get over it. So we first educate them, this is not okay. And then we show them the opportunities for them to seek redress. We have a platform called Kuram. They can go there, we can hold their hands as they navigate, the murky justice system. More importantly, we engage with men. We've held focus group discussions. I mentioned we have an entire influencer campaign starting because we want to tell men it is not cool to be an abuser. We have found that pointing or wagging fingers at people is not very effective. And so we're trying to appeal to their finer selves. And then finally, we are engaging the justice system in Nigeria. Number one, to know what online violence is. We have some laws, but we don't have enough laws that cater to online violence or tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And so we're working with the justice system as much as we can, as much as is possible, to say here are ways in which, in ensuring that women and girls find space online, here are ways to protect them. Here are ways to prevent abuse. Because what people don't clock is that online abuse, the consequences of online abuse sometimes rank much higher and stay much longer than incidents of physical abuse because the internet is everywhere. The ubiquity of the internet means that women will experience this violence everywhere. And sometimes the violence extends. So you take down a video from one place, but someone else has downloaded it. And so next week, the video comes back up, and next week, the video comes back up. So yes, we are engaging across these three fronts to ensure that when women and girls come online, they can actually be safe to use the internet, to use digital tools profitably and meaningfully.
Chioma, do you think boys and men are getting enough education in this? Do you think that's prominent enough?
I don't think there's enough education. I mean, we once ran a focus group on consent, and there was a man who said that he had to force his lady a little bit every time they needed to be intimate. And from that focus group, we were able to tell him that that force, no matter how loving, no matter how normalized it is in that relationship, is rape. And so we have to think about the context within which we operate when we engage our men. Sometimes we hear things like, but she talks too much. But who tells you, who gave you the metric that determines whether a woman talks too much or not? Why aren't we saying men talk too much? Why aren't we saying that we need to curb the way men speak, right? So it's the constant education. It's also, and this is really important, consequences. If there are consequences for bad behavior, if there's consequences for criminal action, then there's a deterrent. Right now, there isn't much of a deterrent, which is why you see people feel really free to perpetrate harms online, to dox people, to cyber flash them, to do all these types of things. Sextortion, blackmail, all of these are on the rise in Nigeria. And they're coming from either, aggrieved lovers, they're coming from people who feel disrespected, they're coming from content monetization. And this is such a sore point because people feel like they want to keep eyeballs because the social media platforms are paying for views. And so women and girls bear the brunt of this increased need for viewership.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very strong note to end it on. And of course, this isn't only applicable to Nigeria or South Africa. This is a global issue. Chioma, thank you so very much for coming on the stream. And before we go, we want to hear from you. Do you have a comment about our show, or do you want to see us discuss a certain topic? Well, get in touch, because this is also your show and we are always open to your suggestions. Send us a message on social media, that is AJ Stream, and we will check it out. For me and the entire Stream team, I'll see you soon.